Good morning, everybody. Let's try that again. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right. What school do I have represented here this morning? All right, good. I'm glad to have y'all in the house. Again, we had y'all here for our Martin Luther King Jr. Program, correct? Was it? How many of you all were here at that program? Was any of you here? Okay, there's a few of you here. Good. I'm glad to have you back. We are getting ready to start now. This is African History Month. Some call it Black History Month. Some call it Negro History Month. We are Africans, and so we start from the foundation from where we are. My name is Dr. Kalfani. I'm the director of the Africana Institute, and I'm also the director of the Center for Global Education and Experiences. And I welcome you all who are not Essex County College students and staff. I welcome you all here. We are celebrating, this is our 7th annual Garvey and Nkrumah lecture series. So I ask everybody to please turn off your phones and be ready to take some wonderful notes, because you're about to hear some words from a brother who is a long-time educator and fighter for our people, somebody who is definitely somebody to watch if you want to see and understand the problems and experiences and the solution, some of the solutions to some of the things going on in our community. He's been involved with lots of documentaries, and he's been on the speaking circuit for quite some time. But that's a little ahead of my actual introduction. The first thing we want to do is that we're going to start with libations. And so I ask you all to, libations is a participatory thing, so I ask you all to join me. But right now we're going to pour libations. Libations is an opportunity for us to pay tribute to those who came before us. We know that we didn't get here by osmosis. We didn't get here by our money, our good looks, or whatever else. We got here because of those who sacrificed before us. And so as we pay tribute to those who sacrificed before us, we take a moment out. This is really taking time to pay tribute to their contributions, to their sacrifices, to their successes, to the trials and tribulations that they may have been through. And it's an old process, right? So even in the neighborhood, folks do it today, they just don't recognize what it is. So if someone passes in the community, oftentimes someone will say, I'll pour something out to one of my homies, what? But that's libations. That just happens to be something that is very old, and folks do, and they don't even know where it comes from. So, but today, hopefully we will help you to understand where that comes from. It's an old thing. It happens in most African countries. They do it with water. They do it with other types of things. A lot of places they do use gin or other kinds of alcohol because they talk about the spirits, and so that the ether in the air, the ether from the alcohol. But we use water because water is the cycle of life, right? So water in and of itself is the fundamental property that we have to think about, that our bodies are mostly water. Or what's around us, this earth that we live on, is mostly water. And so that the water that we experience and we see is this fundamental part of our very foundation. And so then as I pour libations, I ask you to participate by saying Ashe. Can everybody try that again for me? Say Ashe. Ashe means so be it in Yoruba, but it also talks about power. Right, so Ashe is power, that the power that we have, so that you all have power, and that to recognize the power that you have, you speak it into being. Ashe? Okay. And so that as we pour the water here today, we want us to remember and to recognize that we're pouring these libations for those who gave us the beginnings of the words, of thinking, of writing, of cultivation, all of those foundational things that made it possible for us to be here. Ashe? And we know that the forces of all those folks that are our ancestors come from all the 4 directions, from the north, Ashe, the south, the east, and the west. That we know that it comes from those who, there really is but one time. Sometimes we think that time is way in the past and way in the future. But you know, if you really understand time, you recognize that your DNA was an element of your physical being, was at the beginnings of time. That is, that they can take your DNA now test and they can find out something about who you were. But that means that part of your physical being was at the beginnings of the beginnings of the beginnings. Ashe? And it means also that that your children's children and their great-great-great-grandchildren and their great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren were also at the beginnings, and they're with you today. Ashe? So we pour libations for those from the past. Ashe? Those from the present, and those yet to come. And that's how we recognize that there's really one time. And that time is that both in the physical and the spiritual sense that there's that one time. And so that we make connection to that, and our understanding helps us to take a leap of faith and a leap in knowledge about that past and the present and the future. We want to pay tribute to those who brought us writing systems. We know that in ancient Kemet, they had 3 different writing systems. What the Greeks called the hieroglyphics, or the metanetra, the demotic, and the heretic. They had 3 writing systems it was a very, very old and long civilization. So they had those writing systems that happened over a period of time, and then they overlapped. So for those who brought us those levels of writing, we say Ashe. Kaba, he has some great insights. I hope he shares a little bit of it with you today about something called the Shabaka bone. And if you get the chance to get some of that information, it talks about an early writing system. It's one of the earliest systems. And then if you go down south, in South America, in the southern part of Africa, you have the Khoi and the San people. Their oppressors called them the Khoi, and they called the Khoi the Hottentots, and they called the San the Bushmen. But these folks have some of the oldest writing systems that still exist today, and we call it rock art, right? Their writings are still on the walls. If you go to the walls in southern part of Africa, you will still see those writings today. So for those who taught us how to communicate in a written format, we say Ashe. Those who helped us to understand buildings, those buildings that still last today, the great buildings. You know, does anybody know the longest building in the world, or the longest wall in the world? What is it called? The Great Wall of what? See, they keep telling y'all that miseducation. Did you know that the Great Wall of China is 5,500 miles, but the Great Wall of Benin is 9,000 miles? Right, so that the Great Wall of Benin is even longer than that. So we have all of these things that you can look it up. Don't listen to me, prove me. But look it up for yourselves and find out this information. You got to dig deeper. I always say that the more we know, the less we know. So we got to dig deeper so that we can know more. Ashe? And we pour libations to those brothers and sisters who helped to understand that during the Middle Passage time, right? So you had 2 slave trades that happened. One was the European slave trade that took folks from Africa to both Europe and to Central America, South America, and North America. And then you had the Arab slave trade that took people to Saudi Arabian archaeopage. And so for all those folks who were caught up in that process, we say Ashe. For those who made it through, right? So some of them didn't make it through. But for those who made it through those processes, and I have a much longer story I won't go into today, but those who made it through, we say Ashe. Those who, when they made it through, they helped bring about things that you take advantage of today. That the lighting system that you know of today, even though you maybe know of Thomas Edison, you may not know of Lewis Latimer, who made the light. Edison's light only lasted for a few minutes, but it was Lewis Latimer, a brother, who got a patent for the incandescent bulb that lasted a much longer time. And so you have light today because of his work. Ashe? You go to the stoplight because of Garrett A. Morgan. Ashe? You have air conditioning because of brothers. You have the GPS. I just learned that the GPS system was another sister that created the GPS. She was the one that helped to coordinate all the mathematical. She did the mathematical calculations for the GPS system. How many people knew that? Right. So you had a sister who did the GPS system. Ashe? So all of these folks who invented things that help us to do what we want to do today. That if you can't see well, there's another sister who invented LASIK eye surgery. Right? So there's all these different things that we don't know about that we benefit from, but we oftentimes think that there's people other than us who did them. But when we dig in deep, we learn the contributions that we've made to the world. Ashe? And I want you to call out some of the names of those great ancestors that help us make us possible for us to be here today. Come on now. Malcolm X. Y'all don't know any of the names? Harriet Tubman, Ashe. Come on, call out their names loud. Ashe. 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 Oduduwa. I just heard that. Huh? Ashe. 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 There you go. Yes, yes, Arumala. All of those great Yoruba ancestors, we want to make sure we call their names too. So yes, 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 make sure you call them. Who? Ogu. There you go. Ashe. Uh-huh. All right. Shango. Ashe. So for all of those, and then you have family ancestors. Call out your family ancestors, those who've passed and made it possible for you personally to be here, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your mothers and fathers, if they're not with you still. Those names, call them out. Hattie Rogers. Ashe. Ashe. Come on now, this side of the room is silent. Ashe. 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 And so for all those whose names we didn't call, but we recognize that their contributions to our very personal and to our extended family contributions, we say Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. All right. Thank you very much. So I want you to recognize that in this event that we have here, the Garvey and Nkrumah lecture series, I named this after Garvey and Nkrumah because they play such a pivotal role in our experience as people of African descent. That Garvey and Nkrumah, right? Garvey studied on his own. He spent so much time studying and learning. He came here actually to study, to do some work with Booker T. Washington, and that didn't play out. And so then he kept moving, and he pushed the envelope. And all his first experiences weren't successful. But one of the things I think we learned from Garvey is that if you study him, is that his tenacity. Right, we've got to have that level of tenacity, and I want you all to understand that. And in Nkrumah, both of them were Pan-Africanists, so that's why we named this lecture series after them. Garvey didn't really use the word Pan-Africanism, but he was a Pan-Africanist to the heart. And so then we want you to understand what Pan-Africanism means. And so I'm gonna not cover that. You're gonna talk about that, or you want me to? Okay, so then on Pan-Africanism deals with the connection between African people, and that we want to be able to think about how the various ways pan means to look abroad, across. And so we have these the way we look across it, and that all people of African descent, doesn't matter if you were born in the United States, or if you were born in Cuba, or you were born in Brazil, or you're born in Jamaica, or Guyana, or you're born in Ghana, or Nigeria, or South Africa, or Kenya, all the places that we are born as African people in the kind of present context, that we're still people of African descent, right? And then so if you really take a back all the way to the foundations, that everybody comes from Africa, right? So that the foundations of all the DNA, the archaeological, biological evidence, it suggests that all human beings began in Africa, and so that we all have this connection. But we have these competition and conflict that we have that ensues from it. Well, Garvey and Nkrumah tried to at least bring together people of African descent to think about how we come together, how we build together. And I want you all to think about that today. And I hope that your teachers who all brought you here will help to give you some assignments to help you think about those things. I see you all have notes to take, so that's good. I'm glad you have some notes to take. When we think about that's the possibility of thinking broadly and outside the box, that Garvey and Nkrumah thought outside the box and did outside the box. Nkrumah, both of them were here in the U.S. for a period of time. Nkrumah went to Lincoln University and began exposed to some of the thinking of people of African descent in America. And Garvey having his own ideas from Jamaica, but then coming here and seeing and experiencing folks and coming up with ideas about how to change the world. And what we want you to do is figure out how you're going to change the world. Because one of you is the next Garvey. One of you is the next Fannie Lou Hamer. One of you is the next Madam C.J. Walker. One of you is the next Nelson Mandela. And we need you to realize it. You have to wake up and see that is the role, that they were young folks just like you at some point in time, and then they took the mantle and changed the world. And you have the ability to change the world. And so I want to introduce to you Baba Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, and he is an educator. He taught in the New York City school system for a long time, and he also he was an educator in the Bronx, from where he retired in 2009, and he also he has a bachelor's degree in international politics from New York University. His minor was in Caribbean Studies. He got his first master's in world history from Hunter College, and received his second master's in science in educational administration and supervision at City College. He basically is a wealth of knowledge, and he takes that wealth of knowledge and he shares it with folks in a organization that he created, the Purank House, which is now he's a consultant, and he consults with folks, and he goes out and helps to educate folks and help them to build their educational foundations. We have a small group of us here in the city of Newark have a homeschool, an African-centered homeschool co-op, and he came to our co-op and did a workshop to help us to figure out ways to best educate our own children, right? And so this is something that he does all around, and what he's here today is to share some wisdom with you, and I encourage you to take some notes, to ask some questions, and we're going to have a reception afterwards, and we're going to have a second session, but I want to just open the door and ask my brother to come join us up on stage, and I ask you to give him a round of applause.
Hotep, H-O-T-E-P. H-O-T-E-P, it means peace in the ancient African language spoken in Kamene, or in Egypt. I thought about ways to begin talking to you. One of the things that I enjoy the most is to talk to you, our young people, to help you understand. I've taught high school, I've taught every grade, I've taught college also. And one of the most important things to understand is things that happen. When I was in the second grade, my mother used to get her hair done up in Harlem on 120th Street. And I used to go with her. I was 7 years old. And it was in the springtime, 1961. And there was an African-American gentleman that had a luncheonette a couple doors down that I used to eat. That was the highlight of my coming. And one time I went in to eat, and then I came out, and I saw that there was a crowd at the end of the street on 121st Street and 7th Avenue. This is in Harlem. And I asked my mother if I could go, and she said, yeah, be careful, all the other things mothers tell sons. And I worked my way to the front, and I began to listen to this gentleman that was talking. And I couldn't get over, because I had never seen anyone look like this before. I was looking at him, I was looking up at him, and I was trying to figure out, where does his forehead end and his hair begin? I had never seen anyone whose skin complexion and hair color was the same. I was fascinated. I was just looking up in his face. Maybe about 20 minutes, he was talking to the group was talking to him. Preach, yeah. Talk to us. And then it wrapped up. The people went their way, the gentleman that was speaking went his way, and I went back to the beauty parlor. There was a brother that worked in the beauty parlor, elder brother, and he came in and he said, you know, you're not going to believe who was just talking to us. And Mrs. Jefferson, my mother's beautician, said, well, who was it? He said, you ain't going to believe it. He's going to say, but, well, tell us, who was it? He said it was Malcolm X. And they said, oh, Malcolm wasn't there talking to you. He said, yeah, he was. He was talking to Malcolm. He said, just ask that brother right there. He was looking up in Malcolm's face. I bet you he can tell you everything Malcolm said, talking about me. I don't remember a thing Malcolm was talking about, because I was so busy trying to figure out where his forehead ended and his hair began. And I tell this story all the time because I'm always very careful when I talk to young people, because as an adult, I may be thinking about what I'm talking about, just like you're looking at me right now. Your mind could be somewhere else. You might be paying attention to me, you might be looking at me, but there might be something that you're looking at that has your attention. That's my one and only story of being in the presence of Malcolm X. This day, right around this time, 54 years ago, I was at home finishing up a social studies project in the 6th grade. And over the television, there was a flash. There was a news flash that said, the preacher of hate was killed by hate. Now remember, I'm in his presence one time, I'm 7 years old. Now I'm in the 6th grade. I knew they weren't telling the truth. And the reason why I knew they weren't telling the truth was because as a 7-year-old standing in the front, the people are behind me and Brother Malcolm was right in front of me. I could feel the love that Malcolm had for the people and the love that the people had for Malcolm. That story becomes very important because as a young person, you know the real deal. I've been around young people enough in my life. You all know what the real deal is. You know what's important. You know when someone's jiving you. You know when someone's trying to get over on you. You understand that, particularly when you're in high school now. Young people, you have to understand what the future holds for you. It's very important that you understand. Don't be afraid of science. Don't be afraid of chemistry. Don't be afraid of physics. Don't be afraid of math. There's a book called The Physics of the Future by a Japanese brother by the name of Dr. Michio Kaku. Right now, they're doing experiments building space elevators. Right now, they're thinking about putting hotels on the moon. Your generation is going to be a part of that. And if you ain't in it, you ain't going to win it. You heard Dr. Kalfani tell you about all the great people. GPS, your cell phone was developed by a brother from Africa, from Nigeria. The World Wide Web was created by people of African descent. So when you go on to the internet, you can thank a brother for that. The sisters, you saw Hidden Figures. You have to be a part of this. You can't be afraid of academics. I hear folks say, oh, okay. You know, like if you're intelligent, if you're what they call a nerd, they say you act in white. But that's because you don't know your history. Because when you're smart, you act in black. But they don't tell you that. So you think that because everything you see out here is somebody else, you don't realize who gave them that. Now, I only have but so much time with you, so there are some points that I need to make with you. I'm going to give us time to just have an interchange between us to talk. But young people, you have to understand that this brother, Marcus Garvey, born 1887 in Jamaica, wanted to start a school. Dr. Kalfani was talking about. He wanted to start a school for people in Jamaica. And he had heard about a man by the name of Booker T. Washington, who had started Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama. So we contacted Booker T. Washington and asked him, can I come down and talk to you to see how you developed your school? I'd like to start a Tuskegee Institute like yours in Jamaica for the people. So Booker T. Washington said, come on. By the time Marcus Garvey made it up to the United States, Dr. Washington had died. But Marcus Garvey said, you know something? I'm not going to go back to Jamaica. There's a lot of stuff happening. So he came up to Harlem, New York. And he decided that he was going to begin to associate with the African American community. He was going to unite the people of different varying backgrounds of African descent. And so he developed an organization known as the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA. And he said, we're going to develop an organization that is going to have Africans from wherever they are, whether they are at home in Africa or abroad anywhere in the world. We're going to start to unite them, because we can see they're dividing us. They're dividing Jamaicans from Puerto Ricans, from Dominicanos, from Cubanos, from Haitians, from African Americans in Chicago. They're separating us from our complexion and our hair texture, our gender, our age. The UNIA is going to unite all this. And he said, this is for Africans at home and abroad, and that Ethiopia one day is going to stand righteous, and kings will return to the throne. Ethiopian kings will return to the throne. This was his proverb. Ethiopians will return to the throne. Well, in 1940, Marcus Garvey died in London, in the United Kingdom. In the early 40s, there was a gentleman that left Ethiopia. His name was Tafari Makonnen, but he was a mayor, and so he was called Ras Tafari Makonnen. When Tafari Makonnen returned back to Ethiopia to assume authority to become the emperor of Ethiopia, there was a minister from Jamaica by the name of Reverend McPherson, who attended the coronation in Ethiopia. And he watched Tafari Makonnen ascend the throne in Ethiopia, and he corrected his name. He changed his name from Ras Tafari Makonnen to Haile Selassie. McPherson was a Garveyite. He was part of the UNIA. So he returned to Jamaica and he said, you know something? I saw the prophecy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey come true. I watched an Ethiopian ascend to become a king in Ethiopia. So he started a movement. But he didn't take the coronation name. He took his given name. He let the Makonnen go to the side, but he said this movement is going to be called Rastafari. This was the connection of Ethiopia to Jamaica. Now, as you know, there's quite a few brothers and sisters who have come forward, and they dedicated music and poetry in dedication as it relates to the verbalization or the vocalization of this movement known as Rastafari, and this music is called reggae music. Okay, remember now, you're dealing with Pan-Africanism. You're dealing with Africans all over the world. So what did they do in República Dominicana? They got reggaeton. They took reggae with the music of the Dominican Republic and blended it together. Pan-Africanism. We're all one. And that becomes important, young people, because I'm hearing too many of us talk about each other. Oh, those Africans over there. This is an African American talking about an African as if it's separate. Pan-Africanism says that we are all the same by matter of degree. You can go to Puerto Rico, right in the middle of the island, there is a place known Luisa Aldea. African people there. Bomba y Plena is the music that came out of Africans. Go to the Dominican Republic. Okay, when Africans were brought to the Dominican Republic, they were made to work in the fields, and they were chained right leg to left leg. They were chained together to work in the fields. And to pass the time away, these Africans would move from side to side. Okay? And pretty soon, like Africans do, they put their hips into it. Okay? And that's merengue. That's where the merengue came from. We don't know our history. We don't know who we are. We separate ourselves. They've made us ashamed of Africa. They made us think that Africans are primitive. When Dr. Kalfani was talking about the Benin city, I can take you to Nigeria, and I can take you to a place known as Eredo, E-R-E-D-O. Don't believe me? You can Google it. E-R-E-D-O. Google it. There is a city in Eredo that is a walled city of 100 square miles. But the city itself is 400 square miles in its size. 400 square miles. You know, from where I live in the Bronx to Philadelphia is 90 miles. DC is 325 miles. Do you know what it would be like to live in a city that if you walk from one side to the other, it would be equivalent to traveling somewhere from Bronx, New York to Virginia? One city. And this city was up 1000 AD. They have 2-story buildings. Again, young people, don't believe me, because I'm not here to make you believe me. I'm here to make you think. But it's not just about, I gotta come down here because I got to get close. I can't let this happen. It's not just about the idea of you knowing this. What you gonna do? What are you gonna do when all is said and done? Each and every one of you is a genius. You've been given a gift, a very unique gift. And even though two people may have the same gift, you're not going to demonstrate it the same way. But what you going to do? The world that you're going on out here, like I told you in science, they're building space elevators. Do you know one day cars will not look the way they look now? That cars are going to be moving along magnetic tracks, just like a train. Imagine magnetic tracks up in the air where cars are moving. They're doing that experiment today. Within 100 years, cars are going to be up in the air also. Not just on the ground, but up in the air. They're doing this research. Check it out. The Physics of the Future by Michio Kaku, M-I-C-H-I-O-K-A-K-U. Check it out for yourself. Don't believe me. This is what, and so they're not going to tell you we're not going to give you a job because you're black. They're going to ask you, are you qualified in science? And if you ain't qualified, you're not going to get the job. But you qualified. You come from ancestors that taught the world. In rap music, y'all, you know, you hear people talk about, yo, Mo. Well, who's Mo? Do you know who Mo is? They're talking about the Moors. Do you know who the Moors were? See, they don't teach you this in world history. They don't teach you that the Moors were Africans that went into Europe in 710 AD. They don't tell you that these Africans brought universities into Europe. They brought soap into Europe. They brought a very special water that was to disinfect you when you were sick. They called it al-kul. Al, in the Islamic language, brings forward a concept of something sacred. Al-kul, holy waters. You use it. It's called alcohol. Rubbing alcohol. They brought that. They brought strawberries into Europe. They brought olives into Europe. They brought grapes into Europe. They taught Europeans how to make wine. Now you drink Italian wine and you think Italians invented that? You did that. You taught them agriculture. This is your history. This is what you've done. And now you think when you smart, you acting white. You don't know when you acting smart, you acting black. Your ancestors gave the world Western civilization. We built libraries in Europe. The University of Salamanca, the University of Toledo, the University of Lisbon was created by African people. Oxford University, Cambridge University was developed by African people and peoples of European descent who studied at the feet of the Moors, these Africans, and went to England and built these universities. And some of them from Cambridge and Oxford came to the United States, and they built a university in Harlem. It was called King's College. And now I have the nerve to hear black folks say, I'm the first graduate of Columbia University, and you don't even know you created Columbia University. This is your history. I'm not talking superiority or inferiority. I'm not into that. I'm talking about what you've done. And sisters, let me tell the young sisters something up in here. You invented math and science. Men didn't invent math and science. But how is that possible? What's the evidence of it? What's the science of women developing science and math? Well, you have to go back to something very simple. Necessity is the mother of invention. Why would a man have to count? Numbers is the basic and most important part of mathematics. Once you have numbers. Now I'm going back in time now. I'm not going back into a time where you think. I'm talking about in a time when the early human beings in Africa were developing thinking patterns. Why does a man have to start to count? There is no reason. Why does a woman have to count? I'm talking about nature now. Why would a woman have to count? Because of your cycle, your life cycle. And because of your life cycle, sisters, you began to count in order to prepare for your life cycle. In counting your life cycle days, you came to realize that your cycle came in 4 phases. That's the creation of mathematics, is the number system. It's called number sense. Isn't that the first thing we all learn? The first thing we learn is how to count. Okay, and we don't even teach you the symbols of the numbers. We just teach you 1 through 10 for the most part. Go on sometimes beyond that. But what about science? How did women create science? Women looked up into the heavens. And sisters in Africa realized that there was a celestial body that, like her, having a 28, 29, 30-day cycle, there was a celestial body that also had a 28, 29, 30-day cycle. And that's the moon. You also realized, sisters, that this moon, like you, had 4 phases. And so you began to chart the movement of the moon as it related to the movement of you, and you created a calendrical system. The numbers is to math what a calendrical system is to science. Astronomy is the base science of all things to study. Just like numbers is math. If you can't get the numbers right, you can't do math. If you don't get a lunar cycle right, you can't do science. You can't do physics. You can't do chemistry. You can't do oceanography. All of those are based in the calendrical system. So sisters, I'm taking away your right to say math is hard. Because it's in your DNA to be able to do math. And it's been, do you know something, sisters? Let me tell you something else very interesting. Do you know that the day your grandmother was born, you were born? Do you know, sisters, I'm speaking to right now, when you were born with every egg that you will ever produce. If that is true, then that means when your mother was born inside your grandmother, she was born with your egg. Which means that when your grandmother was born, or your great-grandmother was born, she was born in her mother. This is science. This is African science. This is something that we all have to understand. Don't be afraid of science. Kwame Nkrumah, a brother born in Ghana, 1909. He came to the United States. And he studied. He studied hard. He went to Lincoln University and the University of Pennsylvania. He became the first prime minister and the first president of Ghana in 1957. And he died in 1972. Kwame Nkrumah believed in the organization of African people. He came to this part of the world and he met African Americans that he connected with. He saw a history in America, and he came to realize that there was a dual oppression that happened to people in Africa and people that happened in the diaspora. Diaspora, some people say D-I-A-S-P-O-R-A, diaspora. It means the same thing as pan. It means all over. The African diaspora is wherever Africans are all around the world, but not in the continent. All Africans outside of the continent. And he, like Marcus Garvey, came to realize there's a cultural connection. There is a cultural connection between the brother that's living in Washington, D.C., and a brother who is from my community. There is a connection between the sisters that are in Philadelphia with African women in Ghana, in Accra. There's a connection. There's a cultural connection. And I'm gonna give you all a cultural connection right now. You see, my son's into hip hop. He enjoys hip hop. And I used to tell him all the time, I say, Heru, let me tell you something, bruh. Hip hop is my generation. Hip hop is my generation. Let me tell you what happened in hip hop, okay? So you can understand this. The other day they celebrated in the Grammy Awards, the Motown sound, and everybody's dancing and singing. Okay, Marvin Gaye and all the rest of them having that good time, right? But what you don't realize, because you were born into success, you were born into African people doing things. There was a brother that you need to know historically. His name is Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke is the first African American to own his own label in music. And Sam Cooke's first client, does anybody have an idea who the first album on Sam Cooke's label was? Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali had an album he called I Am the Greatest. And guess what it was? It was an album of rap. It was a rap album. He was doing poetry. Motown. Aretha Franklin. I'm taking you in history now, because for you to understand where you are right now, you got to understand your history. Hip-hop didn't happen overnight. In fact, hip-hop wouldn't be around if it wasn't for something that we call doo-wop. And doo-wop came out of bebop. Bebop came out of rhythm and blues. Rhythm and blues came out of blues. Blues came out of spiritual, and the spiritual came out of Africa. You got to understand the history of this. And you have to respect the genius of people that did the best they could. Y'all know Wu-Tang? Y'all know Wu-Tang? Do y'all have Wu-Tang's latest album, The Saga Continues? Go to number 17. Go to number 17. It's called Message. You know Message? Number 17 on The Saga Continues, Wu-Tang's Clan latest album. That's me. That's me. Go to Wu-Tang. You know, when you get a chance, you don't have to get on the phone now. Go to Wu-Tang Clan, The Saga Continues, go to number 17 and listen to the message. I was in a film called The Secret to Ballin' with Snoop Dogg and with Kelly Rowlands, with Method Man, Redman. And while I was in Los Angeles, the brother asked me, will you sit and talk to the young people? And young people just like you, I'm sitting in Compton on a rock. And they said to me, what is your message to young people? And that's what the message is on Wu-Tang's album. That is my response to talking to young people your age. I got nothing but respect for y'all. For what y'all have done, despite and in spite of the fact that my generation dropped the ball. We should have been there for you. We should have talked to you. We should have made you understand what your responsibility is, not just to the community, but to the world. But we were caught up in a lot of things. But my point is, I got nothing but respect for the younger generation because you did the best you could with what you had. I don't appreciate some things I hear, but I understand the metaphor. I understand figurative language. I understand the beat. That's what my son helped me understand. He said, yo, Dad, you getting caught up in words. We're caught up in the beats. See, when you come from a point where you're listening to words, cursing and saying inappropriate things, bother people who are thinking in words. But when you're thinking in beats, it's not the same thing. And that's why we as a generation who are fed up with words, we have to understand what it is that you're saying in rap. But here's what they did. Black music took the country over. They were so scared of the greatness of rock and roll that they had to take one of their own and make him the king of rock and roll. Now, I'm not going to get caught up in Eminem. I kind of like his stuff. But he ain't the king of hip-hop, I'll tell you that right now. He good. I like his stuff. I like Elvis. But he ain't the king of rock and roll. Timberlake, he all right. Justin, he all right. But he ain't no Usher. He ain't no Chris Brown. He all right. But we created something back then. There was a music. There was a success. And then all of a sudden, black radio started. Here in New Jersey, I know in Newark you had a black radio station. In New York, we had WWRL. We had inner city broadcasting. But what happened was they got scared of us. So they began to oppress us and downpress us and stop us from being able to do rap. And in so doing, brothers and sisters in the Bronx decided that they were going to take those turntables and they were going to start to have house parties up on Sedgwick Avenue, Cool Herc. Have the house parties. And you had the DJ, which means what? Disc jockey, which is what radio personalities were called. And so what they did is that they would cue up records. And all of a sudden, when you cue up a record, you get to the very beginning of the record, and you get to the first sound of the record. That's called queuing up a record. But when you get there, you have to go back and forth to make sure you've got that first sound. So it sounds like zit, 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 zit. That's where hip-hop came from. And by the way, hip-hop is a culture. Rap is 1/5 of hip-hop. You've got clothing. You've got swag. Okay? You got the way you act, you know, all this sort of stuff. That's all part of hip-hop. The way you cross the stage and do what you do, that's all part of hip-hop. But rap music is the vocalization of the culture. We had a brother, you may not know this group, it's called The Last Poets. It's one of the early rap groups back in the 60s. There's a brother, his name is Abio Doom. We call him Doom. We used to have Abio Doom come to our middle school to teach children writing because we found that, you know, him being very popular and at the same time him being a writer, that we could introduce writing to young people through rap. So we had Abio Doom come in, and he was talking to young people, middle school, younger than you. And he said, you know, I travel all around the world. The Last Poets perform all around the world. And what we've come to realize is that you young people don't understand the impact that you are having all around the world. They rapping in Iran. They're rapping in Vietnam. They're rapping in Nigeria. They're rapping in Iraq. They're rapping in Japan. In fact, they used to have a place to dance. They used to have a dance hall that when you walked in, the whole building was the face of a black man with a big afro. And when you walked up the stairs into the building, that was his tongue that was sticking out. I saw that in Ebony magazine. See, y'all, because we are not exposed to our history and our culture, because we don't know who we are, we don't know how great we are. We don't know what we can really and truly achieve. And as young people, brothers and sisters, brothers, let me tell y'all something. That sister, there was a word that we had in Egypt, in Kamene. That's what we call Egypt, Kamene. There was a word that we had for our queen or for our woman. And the word was, there were three words to it. It was the Hemet Neset Waret. Hemet Neset Waret. And it means the deep well of water that I go to when I am parched by the desert. Now, I don't know if y'all ever been thirsty before, but I ain't talking about thirsty. I'm talking about being parched. You ever been to the desert? I've been in the desert. And I know what it's like to be parched. Parched is when you be blowing out dust out your mouth. That's how thirsty you are. That's how dry your throat is. And you know, when you're feeling like that, there's only one thing you're thinking about. You're thinking about that water. That's the only thing that's going to solve your problem and meet your needs is that water. Can you imagine considering a woman that she wasn't just water? She just wasn't a well. She was a deep well of water. So not only would sister quench your thirst, she would solve your problems and meet your needs. Okay, yeah, we can go there. That's how we felt about our women. She wasn't our bitch. Come on, that's what y'all say, right? Y'all laugh like, well, maybe it's because this old head is saying it. But I heard a couple of them when I was sitting behind y'all. She ain't your hoe, she ain't a thought. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, and sisters, you also have to lay down the law as to how you want to be treated. Because when the brother act inappropriate, it's your job and your responsibility to tell him, you know something, I don't roll like that. Okay? Now, maybe that other person that you was with, go with that. I don't play that. See, young people, I have to keep it real with you. I want to keep it real with you because there are things that we have to do. A nation is only as strong as its weakest family. And nations aren't built with baby daddies. You have to have a commitment. You have to have a respect for the sister. And the sister must have a respect for you. You must have a respect for yourself, and the sister must have a respect for herself. That's the African tradition. Do you know they found that sisters that dress in African dress and sisters that dress in Muslim dress, do you know they found that very rarely, if ever, are they ever spoken to disrespectfully by a brother? Because when you carry yourself a certain way, you're telling the world something about you. We have hard work to do, family, and I'm trying to get it to you. I'm trying to be as real with you as possible. I'm glad I started that last talk because I see some people done woke up in here. But sometimes you have to go to sleep in order to catch some of the things that I say, because it's not easy. It's not easy to face the truth. You have to understand who you are, what you've done, what you've achieved, what your ancestors have achieved. They did not bring slaves in Africa. I hear people say they brought African slaves to America. They didn't bring African slaves to America. They brought human beings to America and they enslaved them. Because think about the psychology of it. If you hear as a young person they brought slaves from Africa, well, it only makes sense that you'd be a slave in America. You were a slave in Africa, you were a slave in America. But if they tell you they brought human beings with talent, doctors and lawyers and artists and masons and builders, architects, if they tell you that and then tell you that they were enslaved and held in bondage against their will, then you'd understand that these aren't slaves. I don't use the word slave. Slave is a noun. I use the word enslaved. You know, check this out. Brooklyn. Do you know the largest slave plantation in the United States in the early 1700s was in Brooklyn? Do you know New York had enslavement? Do you know that the enslavement of people existed in all 13 colonies at one time? See, we get the impression that enslavement only existed in the South. You'll have a sense of Battery Park? See, because you're in New Jersey, so you can see Battery Park, the southern part of Manhattan. They used to bring the ships from the Caribbean, and they would come up into Battery Park, which is right down there by the South Ferry. You know, where you take the ferry to Staten Island? Right there, they would dock the boats, and they would take the Africans off the boat, and they would march them across to a place called Wall Street. But along the way, if they had so many Africans, they couldn't put all the Africans in the Wall Street. So what they would do is they would put them in prisons along this street that they were going through. And then they would take the ones that they were going to sell to Wall Street. That street, that where all the prisons are, today, we call that Chambers Street. When you're walking in Chambers Street in Manhattan, for those of you who might go over there, that's where they held Africans. Those were all prisons, all along Chambers Street. And then they would bring Africans, and there are prisons under Wall Street, you know. There are prisons under Wall Street where they would keep the Africans, and when it was time to bring them up, you see where they have the stock exchange? And their exchange, that's where they used to sell us. Right there on Wall Street. And we built the wall. The Dutch. Now you hear, what do they sell? What do they trade on Wall Street? Stocks and bonds. Where did that word come from? Stocks and bonds. Livestock in bondage. Now they say stocks and bonds. But the real word is livestock because we were livestock. They counted us with the cows and the sheep. These two men believed that colonialism in Africa and enslavement in the American hemisphere would unite us as a people and would allow us to be able to move forward. Yeah, because I don't really want this to be so much of a lecture. I just want to drop some information on you to help you understand how great you are. But now I want to engage with you in questions and comments and answers and things that as young people you might have. So I'm going to turn the floor over to y'all. What do you think? Sure. Let's talk, family.
All right, anybody got a question? Comment or observation? Now y'all done heard some stuff y'all ain't heard before, so now I know somebody got some kind of question. Okay, here we go. Let's have your name and your question.
My name is Bridget, and my question is, where is that head in Japan that you were speaking of?
That I don't know. In fact, I don't even know if it exists. That was during this back in the 70s. But if you Google it, I'm sure that you Google it, they'll have a picture, because the picture was in Ebony Magazine. That's how I saw it. Ebony Magazine. Yes. It was a huge head. It was the whole front of the building.
She said, what was it? Do you know what it's called? Okay. On that note, all of Ebony and Jet have been cataloged by Google, and so if you do Google searches, you'll find all of Ebony and Jet. Any other questions? Was it Central High School? Okay, there you go, all the way down there.
My name is Ariana, and I want to know your opinion on Afrocentricity. I wanted to know your opinion on Afrocentricity.
Dr. Molefi Asante coined the phrase. And Afrocentricity is the question. My views towards Afrocentricity. We don't look at the world through our own eyes. And what Dr. Molefi Asante was trying to get us to understand is that we have to look at the world through our eyes, not through someone else's eyes. So that when you're looking at other cultures, when you're looking at other things that you think are important, you have to look at them through your eyes as you view them, as you understand them. So Afrocentricity becomes very important because there are three things somebody will take from you when they wish to oppress you. They will take your history, they will take your language, and they will take your psychological factor. Your psychological factor is what I call the VIPs. Your values, your interests, and your principles. History, language, values, interests, principles. What they do when they oppress you is they take your history, your language, your values, interests, and principles, and they superimpose on top of you their history, their language, their values, interests, and principles. So that no matter what the outcome of your decision is, it's not going to be in your best interest because you're looking through the eyes of somebody else. Let me give you a straight up example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to try to say this properly. Of what value, as an African American, of what value is George Washington to me? He enslaved over 300 of my people. Of what value is he to me? How can I honestly have any good feelings towards him? I'm being real with you. I know some of us may live in the George Washington houses and the Thomas Jefferson project. Now, Thomas Jefferson is a whole nother conversation. Because if Thomas Jefferson were alive today, he'd be in jail for pedophilia. when you have inappropriate and indecent relationships with children. It's all right. Look, I got to be real I can't come to you at this point. When I say that we dropped the ball, it's because we didn't drop it like it was hot with you. We didn't talk to you. I got to talk to you because you hear this. You hear what they're doing with R. Kelly. But at the same time, they won't tell you about Thomas Jefferson, who had an illicit relationship with a 13-year-old girl. And to hide that indecent relationship, he shipped her off to France. But they also don't tell you, Sally Hemings was her name. They also don't tell you that Thomas Jefferson's wife was the half-sister to Sally Hemings. Because Thomas Jefferson's father-in-law had an illicit relationship with a little girl on the plantation. And that little girl was Sally Hemings. But see, you're in high school now. And if you were in my class, you would know this. Somebody has to tell you all the reality. If you do the crime, you got to do the time. I'm not covering for R. Kelly. What I'm saying is don't make him the face of the crime. Because the reason why a lot of us look the way we look today is because people have been messing with our ancestry. The reason why we look the way we look is because we were. And they could do it legally. And that's why, sister, you have to preserve your decency, your respect, your honor, for it never to happen again. So, going back to Afrocentricity, of what value, interest, or principle does Thomas Jefferson live by? Benjamin Franklin, he died of syphilis. He died of a venereal disease. But nobody tell you that. Oh yeah. Doctor, am I getting too deep now? Yo, let me tell you, fam. Okay. Yo, I gotta break it to you real, family. Young people, I respect you, I honor you, and I honestly love you, and I want the best for you. But in order for you to be able to be your best, you got to know the truth. Out of all this nonsense going on out here, each and every one of you, as you go back to your classrooms, as you decide whether you're going to go to college or not, what you're going to do in your life, you got to understand that you come from good stock. And you got to understand that you don't have to go back to ancient Africa or a classical African civilization. Because quite frankly, you are a classical African civilization. And you can do whatever you want to do. You can achieve whatever you want to. If you can conceive it, you can achieve it. If you can visualize it, you can actualize it. But it's up to y'all. Make that decision in your life, what you want to do. What you want to do. Be strong, man. Hotep.
Oh, y'all can do it better than that. Let's give him a hotep.